All right, welcome back to another WrightStew podcast. I am Paul Stewart.
And I am Brian Wright. Paul Stewart is lucky. He lives in Speaker Studio. I am not so much. I am outside a dance studio waiting for my daughter doing the WrightStew podcast.
That's right. Hey, and the great thing with technology in the year 2025 is we can do those sort of things and bring you some great content. That's really what it's all about. It's about bringing you the great content. And Brian, so you and I coach travel team together.
Yeah.
And one of my and I'm kind of a technical guy, right? A lot of
much more than I. Yeah.
Yeah, I do that kind of stuff. I dabble. Game Changer is a wonderful tool. Absolutely love it. And you can share scores with people. You can share scores with people who are not even in the same state, not in the same country, right? It's a really, really cool tool. And then there's also the video component to it, which is, again, really cool, but drives me absolutely crazy. Because most of the times it's not me handling either the Game Changer or the video, right? I'm typically on the field coaching first or third or in the dugout, just making sure that the game is going as we would like it. And I'm constantly getting texts from, mothers-in-law, grandparents, fathers. Hey, the camera's off. The camera's tilted. It's not work. Just all the time. And I'm like, I'm out here. I don't know. I'm not in charge of that.
I think Paul, I'm gonna blame them a little bit, and then I'm gonna blame you because you have set the expectation as the fixer of problems.
Yeah.
I've lowered the standard within my family, and it's more like they know I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to fix it. So if it's not working, yeah. So I think it's just how you've lived your life. You've kind of set that standard with your family.
Yeah, maybe.
I've set a much lowered expectations. There used to be that skit on SNL, right? They'd have these big giant people like getting together, and it's like you got to lower. If I've already set mine lower, so anything that I do positive in that kind of environment is kind of like a cherry on top. And so, yeah.
Interesting. So I got my standard response then started being like, because I didn't want to deal with it, was Wi-Fi's down. Hey, you would think in 2024 we could do this. 2020 can't do it. Just not technically possible. I kind of defaulted to that because I didn't want to. So
yeah, I don't.
Cat's out of the bag now.
I think it's interesting. Like a lot of times it is interesting. Like you get texts and different things, and wife, family, whatever during those games. I do not hear them, and I just think unless you have another child that's maybe involved in something, I think the expectation needs to be I'm not going to respond.
Yeah. Well, I check Game Changer to check pitch counts sometimes too.
Yeah.
So
that is true. And I'm usually asking you what.
Yeah, you ask me, and I say, "Hey, we're at 55 pitches. Let's start thinking about something." So then I see the text, and I feel like I'm obligated to check them real quick. Or I have other children, like you said, who are participating in events, playing games. So I want to see how they're doing. I'll get videos on how they're doing. So, So technology, it's the greatest thing and the worst thing. So speaking of the greatest and worst thing, we threw out a challenge to our listeners last week on our 50th episode. We're about a week into this. It was our 50 and 15 challenge. Brian, do you know how many states we've knocked out so far?
I think we're at my number 33, aren't we?
We're at 34. We picked up 2 more states. We got Minnesota.
Yes.
And Hawaii.
Hawaii was one I thought we may have to fly there and listen to it ourselves to be able to get that one marked off the list.
Yeah, really exciting. A city called, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but Kappa. It's Kapaa. Sometimes actually spelled Kapa apostrophe A. Okay. Looked at some video, looked at some images of it. I really want to go there. It was beautiful. Wonderful.
I want the person to actually listen to us there. Maybe if they could give us just a little DM or something to let us know if they enjoyed it, thought it was relevant, and what if they clicked on it by accident or on purpose.
Either way, well, I mean, we've got like 3 or 4 listens from them, so maybe they like something. So thank you to our Hawaiian and our listeners in Minnesota. 2 just really other ends of the spectrum right now from a weather perspective for sure. So we've got 34 states down, we got 16 to go, and we've got 7 days to do it. So here's the states we need. If you're out there listening and know people, have family, friends in these states, Washington, Montana, Wyoming, Alaska, Iowa, both Dakotas, New Mexico, Arkansas, Nevada, Kentucky, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Delaware. Those are the 16 we're looking for. Help us out. Go get them. We would greatly appreciate it. So 16 to go in 7 days. We're going to knock that out. So Brian, and one more thing. Hey, thanks for all the folks who are buying merch. Lot of orders coming in. We really appreciate that. Great things going on. That's a great way to support Brian and I. It helps us keep doing what we're doing here. We appreciate it. Go check it out. And the more you order, the more designs and things like that we get out there. We've got some great ideas. Just kind of got to get the ball rolling a little bit. So thank you for that.
Hey, I want to jump.
Yeah,
jump you got one more thing, or I want to jump?
Go for it, man. Go for it.
Hey, so obviously the weather broke today. Beautiful day here in North Carolina. Mid 40s, feels like mid 70s now that we've been so cold.
Yeah.
And so my son and I, we go work out at the little field down the street from us, and we're there hitting. And when we're there, there's like a little kid. He's 11 years old. I overheard some of the conversation, and like his parents, when we walk up, are like yelling at him to do push-ups.
Oh, nice.
And I thought, hey, dude, that's awesome.
Like
and
yelling or encouraging?
It started off.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I am not against this one, but it felt. I was thinking initially maybe they're punishing this kid and making him do like physical activity because the parents didn't look like they would be people that would be into physical activity.
Okay.
If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so they're sitting in the car yelling at him to do push-ups right by the batting cages. And I'm like, dude, that's a little much. And then they walk back out onto the field. There's a little field back behind the cages, and I'm looking at him, and they're making him run sprints and underneath a certain time. And then like 3 or 4 other people come out there that aren't super healthy. And again, this is not even pot calling the kettle black. I mean, these guys are, a couple 100 pounds overweight, yelling at this 11-year-old to run these sprints in under a certain amount of time.
They're like, you don't want to look like me one day.
Well, it was like, hey, he's just lazy. And I'm like, dude, and it's getting bad. I was the closest, Paul, I've ever been to going out there and saying something to somebody else's parents about how they're treating their kid. I have never done that. I've never even been close to that. I believe in hard parenting. But, dude, so he's running, I think they're probably 30 or 40-yard sprints, and he's gotten a certain amount of time. They want him to get him in. He's getting in a little bit over. They're not counting them. Every time he doesn't get them in, they're making him do 10 push-ups. If he complains, they give him 10 more push-ups. So my son and I were there hitting for probably an hour, and this kid is doing push-ups and doing push-ups and doing sprints for an hour. Woo. And then Big Mama comes up there, and he's huffing and puffing. They won't let him sit down in between. They're like, hey, you get tight. You can't sit down. And I'm like, dude, this is insanity, dude. I mean, I'm like, I'm going to go say something. And just to save his kid. Then all of a sudden, the kid flips out. He finds pine cones around him, starts throwing them at. It looked like maybe an uncle, his dad, threw water at both of them.
How was his arm? Was his arm pretty good?
Wasn't good enough to. Well, I don't know. The kid was really upset. Like he was obviously he had broken. And
they broke him. Maybe they're tearing him down to build him up.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that, Paul. It felt like child abuse. And so it put me in kind of a weird place. And so after they're finally done, after he flips out, they quit. But Mom had already given him like an additional 100 push-ups. And he's like, well, that's 10 push-ups. Well, if you're not going to do those 10 right, that's 25 push-ups. This kid's been working out for an hour out here, running, not beating the times. And so finally, as they're walking off, dude, I'm pretty fired up about the whole situation. Again, I'm not this person. And I'm like, dude, what are y'all training for out there? And they're like, wrestling. And I was like, that seems like a little bit much out there. And
wait, you told him it seems like much?
Yeah. And I said, that seems like a little bit much out there. And she's like, well, he's pretty soft. And I was like, wow. And I just felt bad for the kid. I felt bad for the situation. Again, I think if you could put me and you together, Paul, in a lot of situations, you're more, I'd say most times when we're together coaching, you're a little bit more of the, hey, talk to the kids, could explain a little bit more. I'm more like, I'm telling you to do this, do it. And, but dude, that was the closest I've been to be like, dude, maybe I should report these people, dude. It was insane.
Wow,
That's my story today.
that's incredible, dude. Wrestling is a different. That's a
And that's
different
what I,
people.
when I stepped back, I was like, maybe the culture's different. Maybe I'm not familiar with how this should be, but I don't know. It felt
Well, there
like
is something to. I
like
remember,
go ahead.
so when I graduated from high school at Garner, like we had a wrestling team, but we weren't known to be a great wrestling team. But I remember the kids on the wrestling team were maniacs.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember running around with the garbage bags on, trying to cut weight and all the different things they were doing and eating and they were the kids like carrying gallons of water around in high school before that was a thing.
They
They
adopted
were
the
doing a lot
culture.
of stuff.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
kid was 11 years old. So, I mean, overheard some of the conversation, and I'm like, dude. I mean, he's going to quit or murder somebody if you keep treating him like this. I mean,
that's
literally, we saw the kid break as we were out there, and I was like, what in the world are they doing, dude?
well, that's
And
where, and I think the stark contrast as well from the parents being wildly out of shape is,
100%.
I
And
think
there's
that
like
that plays into
there's
it.
literally, Paul, there's literally 5 adults around this kid telling him how good he's not doing. And I'm like, what in the world, dude, am I watching right here, man? And
Did
so it just kind
did
of
you
made
guys
me
try to hit
think,
some BP over there, like try to hit him with the ball or anything, like to
well,
break it
I
up?
thought about, the cage, how it's set up. I mean, we definitely could have pulled the cage up and had my son pull it into into him.
Yeah, he
And,
switched
and
hits. I mean, he could
I
go
mean,
anywhere.
literally, hey, Paul, during this event, I mean, that crossed my mind. I mean, that's how serious I was. I mean, I was this close to racing the cage and having him hit a ball over there just so I could go over there and have an interaction. I mean, and I'm not this way. I'm not that way. But it
No,
was bizarre, bizarre. It just made me think back that, hey, if you're coaching your kid, you can push to a certain extent, and every kid's a little bit different. But if you have to push super hard at 10, 11, 12 years old, they're going to be done once they have a decision. Once they have the ability to make a decision and it's not your decision, they're going to be done anyway. And your relationship's going to be frayed at
oh
that
yeah,
point. So that was kind of my thought process. I was like, hey, you can push kids. And again, I push my kids and I think it's good to be pushed, but there's a line that I don't think you should step over.
no, and like you said, ultimately your relationship with your children should be more important than them being the best 11-year-old wrestler or whatever it is. And to your point, there's some kids that love that. Like as a kid, my parents never did anything close to that, but I enjoyed kind of being tough coaching. I enjoyed
I did, and I
the
was.
feedback.
I
Yeah.
think most people would agree that I was as well. But there's a line that if you step over, you're having some pretty
Yeah,
impacts.
that's
So
child abuse. Yeah. But again, I was at the cages this morning with my son as well. We long toss, pitched, we hit, we kind of went through it all. And same thing though, like I kind of know where his line is. I know how much I can
that's right.
push him and and get the most out of him. I could probably kick him in the butt a little more sometimes. But again, at the same time, I've got two older daughters who are playing in college now, and some of my best favorite memories aren't the games, aren't the state championships. It's just being at the field, taking BP, kind of hanging out and having fun, that sort of thing, and um, doing that. And that's ultimately kind of what's like again what sports is all about. It's building relationships and growing and learning how to work as a team, not tearing people down. Right? We have that is a coaching style. That is a coaching
It's an old
methodology.
school coaching style, not done
Yeah.
with 11-year-olds, done with 18, 19, I think maybe 17-year-olds. But that famously Bobby Knight that was
Yeah.
kind of his
Yeah.
mojo. He loved to break people down and then build them back up. I don't know. Honestly, I feel like in most cases, kids are too smart for that now. I feel like are
Yeah.
too savvy, and I just
Or they
don't
have too
think.
many options. They have too
Yeah,
many options.
and now kids will just leave. And
Yeah.
so, hey, speaking of coaching changes, hey, we're finally getting some.
A lot of movement. A lot of movement
Yeah,
the past couple of days. So we talked about some of these jobs and kind of Brian and I went over through a list of and we kind of had some parameters on what we liked and what we didn't like and ended up so I ended up coaching the Chicago Bears and Brian ended up coaching the New England Patriots. So both of those teams along with a few others have coaches now. So
yeah.
I'm gonna go through the list of coaches where they've landed and I want you to give me Hey, which one of these you think will have the most immediate impact, or from a wins perspective? Who do you think is
Okay.
going to turn it
And
around?
we'll keep notes, and then yeah, hopefully we'll update this next
Yeah,
week.
absolutely. So Jacksonville picked up Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator for Tampa.
Yeah, and what's interesting, that was some back and forth. Obviously, I don't think without Balky getting fired, the GM, he wasn't going to take that job. He
Yeah.
originally told Tampa he wasn't going to take it, and they come back and was going to make him the highest paid offensive coordinator. The big thing that I think he's known for is the rushing numbers that changed whenever he took over that position. Obviously, Carolina has the offensive coordinator. How about all these guys that Baker Mayfield is making money for? All these OCs that
Yeah.
started at Tampa and are like, hey, you only got Baker Mayfield down there and you're winning games. And Canales with the Panthers should give a lot of credit to Baker. And then Liam now going over with Jacksonville. And I think with any of these coaches, and after you name them, really the only thing is Pete Carroll as you get into with the Raiders, because he's going to be high energy and change
Well,
culture.
maybe Vrabel with New England as well.
I think Vrabel is.
I say from a
yes,
known entity, what he brings to the table.
and I think
From
you're
a head
probably
coach.
right. I think you're absolutely right. What's interesting is he never could get like the quarterback situation right in Tennessee. Clearly had a great running back, and when he was let go from Tennessee, that Tennessee essentially fell apart. They got rid of Derrick Henry, which seems insane, or didn't re-sign him.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. Pete Carroll, Vrabel are the two guys that you kind of know. These other guys, you don't really know what Glenn is going to be with the Jets.
Yeah.
Obviously, was drafted by the Jets, first rounder. Obviously, had close to a Hall of Fame career, a really good career, and then has done some really good things with Detroit. But I always felt like with Detroit, at least these last couple years, and I know they've had a ton of injuries, but their Achilles heel has kind of been defense. Obviously, Goff had a terrible game his last game in the playoffs, but it's interesting that it was just a given that he was going to get a job, because it never felt like the defense was the strong point for Detroit. I feel like all these places that they're going in, and you correct me if I'm wrong and comment on it, Paul, I feel like all these places they're going in, there's different problems for each one of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You
And
know,
so you mentioned Pete Carroll in Las Vegas, Mike Vrabel in New England, Ben Johnson going to Chicago, Aaron Glenn going to the Jets, and then Dallas grabbed Brian Schottenheimer. So four of the six are offensive coordinators. And then Vrabel, I would say, is clearly a more defensive minded coach. And then Aaron Glenn, clearly a defensive coordinator heading to the Jets, right? And I heard some people comment on that hire by the Jets, during the past couple of days. And they said it's like one of the most boring hires you could make. And they said, but for the Jets, it's kind of what you want. Like they've been so bad for so long. Like you want to hire somebody who you kind of know what you're getting going in. And if you look
but
at
do you? Hey, Paulie, I would say this: do you really know he's never been a head coach?
no,
I mean,
but ran a good defense in Detroit, had some good players, right? But at the same time, when the Jets were really good, you remember they had Rex Ryan. And what did Rex Ryan do? Built a great defense. I mean, Mark Sanchez.
he wanted to go back there again. He wanted to go
He was
back there
lobbying
again.
for it. But again, that's part of the circus that they talk about with the Jets. If Rex Ryan comes in with the Jets, it's a circus, right? I feel like Aaron Glenn's going to come in a little more no nonsense, a little more
Do they keep?
methodical.
Hey, do they keep Aaron Rodgers or no?
I think he's sticking around for another year. That's what I've seen. All the reports are he's sticking around for another year.
Would you keep him, or did you watch enough of the Jets?
No, I'd let him go. I mean, I love Rodgers. I think he's great, but I think it's past his prime. It's you've got to move on. He's not the long term. They're not winning the Super Bowl next year. You've got to draft your guy, find your guy. Maybe Rodgers. I mean, you don't want what Rodgers sticking around to be what a $40 million coach essentially backup. I honestly I would just cut ties. I think he can still do it, but I think he needs to go to a team that is Super Bowl or very close to being
Really, really close.
Yeah.
Really close. And I got a question. Any chance you bring back Darnold for a second go around there? Obviously, he proved that he could do it with Minnesota. What if he came back again to the Jets
I think that's a
Probably
better
wouldn't want
option,
to.
honestly, a better option than Aaron Rodgers right now. He's not the quarterback that Aaron Rodgers is. Let's make that known, right? But I think Sam Darnold was 26, 27. He's still young.
Dude, he was drafted really young. He was playing as a
Yeah.
20-year-old. And people don't realize, I mean, there's guys that are in college still that will probably play in the NFL that are that age, at least 24. It's just really interesting.
Yeah, so I think Darnold would be a great fit. I mean, and clearly Minnesota is kind of at a crossroads with their quarterback position. They did not expect Sam Darnold to throw up the numbers and have the year he did. Yeah, JJ McCarthy was supposed to be the guy, had the injury. But man, I'm excited for all these coaching jobs. I
So,
think
hey, which
and
one will have the best record? The only one we hadn't mentioned that I think is weird, like Brian Schottenheimer.
oh, Schottenheimer in Dallas, yeah, Ryan Schottenheimer in Dallas. And again, the Cowboys roster isn't bad. I mean, they've got the quarterback, right? They paid the quarterback at least. I don't know if they've got the quarterback. They paid the quarterback, and they've got a good defense. They've got C.D. Lamb. They've got some weapons around them. But the thing is, I mean, does Washington maintain, get better?
Oh yeah, they've got theirs. There's no question that Daniels is the guy. I don't know if you saw the virtual reality that he was doing at 1.75.
Yeah,
That was kind of one of his stipulations to whatever team drafted him. They had to purchase that, and I think he understands that. Hey, I'm a good athlete, in his case, a great athlete. But how quick can I process and read defenses?
yeah. So the point being, they might be in the toughest division of football, right? NFC North might make a case for that, but Washington, I'm assuming they maintain or get better. Philadelphia, clearly really good. The Giants are terrible, but where could the Cowboys end up in there? It's a tough division, and three teams can make it to the playoffs.
But how do you fire the head coach and all of a sudden? And again, I haven't been real critical of Jerry Jones and everything that he's done there. I mean, heck, until this past year, I think they'd won 12 games in the regular season. As a Panthers fan,
Yeah.
you would die to win 12 games again. We don't feel like we're close to that. But it just doesn't make any sense that you let go of the head cheese and then the guy who's there you promote. It's just weird that is they couldn't do any better than that. It's a weird thought process in my mind.
And I mean, Schottenheimer, clearly so Marty Schottenheimer, Brian's dad was an NFL head coach for a long, long time, been around the game. Yeah, has probably forgotten more about it than we'll ever know, right? Just from being around it. So clearly knows what he's doing to get to that level. And again, we've talked about it. Being a coordinator is a different thing than being a head coach. More responsibility, different responsibilities for sure. But again, as a father who did it for a long time, saw it, probably sat in press conferences, probably sat in locker rooms literally his whole life. Maybe it's his time, man. Maybe he's ready.
Well, it's interesting. Like most of the guys that are coordinators that get jobs had a really good previous year. It's rare to see like a coordinator have a down year. Maybe statistically they could pull stuff out, and we'll talk about how good he had done. But you think about Detroit with Ben Johnson and Glenn. You think about the Bucks, Liam coming over from the Bucks to Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Clearly had a solid season. And again, I think Baker Mayfield should be getting some kickbacks from some of these guys. But it's just weird to see, a pretty below par season backup quarterback. It's just interesting to see him let him go. So
yeah. So I mean, it'll be really interesting. Again, the NFL kind of rules the world, and we'll be kind of throwing around our picks tomorrow on what we think of the NFC and AFC championship games tomorrow. So excited about that. One more story, Brian, I want to talk about. So saw this come across, and it felt a little more like a social media story, but it was a sports story. So there was a kid in California, and I'm going to try to say his last name. Nick Ketchikian.
Yeah.
Scored
I saw this story.
Scored 102 points in a regulation game. They said he scored 102 with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. His brother Dylan, we'll call him Nick and Dylan for the sake of this because I'm not sure if I'm saying their last name right. His brother had 35 assists which also set a record. So the 102 points. So the coach, he had 79 points at halftime.
Well, the score was like 79-0 at halftime, right?
Correct. Yeah, the score was out of hand. And the coach said he left him in the game because he wanted him to break the 100 point. So 100 points was the record. He wanted him to break the record. The final score of the game was 119-25. And so they played a school called Waverly. So this is in California. I don't know who these schools are, right? But I went back and looked it up. So Mesrobian, the school that won, they are 11-6 overall. This other school, Waverly, according to Max Preps, is 0-9. They haven't submitted all their scores. But here's the other scores they've lost by: 51-19, 71-9, 79-13, 65-14, 123-27. They played a nail biter against another school, 33-21. So they were locked into a battle there. But clearly, this Waverly school is truly terrible. So I don't know. Here's my thought, or my question: How long do you keep this in? Why do you keep them in there for that long? To break a record? Is that? I mean, what are you doing?
I think we've seen the example of class, how that's done with Saquon when it didn't matter, breaking records. And we've seen the class of the coach. I just don't think when I originally read this, I thought, hey, if their team won like 125 to 105 or 90 or something remotely competitive, hey, that's an accomplishment. But when you end up winning 119-25 and you're up 79-0 at halftime, this is dumb. It's embarrassing, really, for everybody involved. The other team needs to cancel their season. They're clearly not capable of competing. And then I'm not looking for punishment or anything like that, but it's like from the winning side. But you do wonder, like, how once you get up 50 points, it's time to put the water boy and the manager in, and and maybe they're different. At least our schools here, there's no shot clock, so literally you can pass it around.
Play little four corners, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you don't score at all, but I don't know, dude. I guess it doesn't matter in the long run. Both sides will have good stories to tell when they're adults, but I'm just not a fan of just rubbing it in when there's clearly superiority on one side. Hey, I love competing. I love, trying to step on somebody's throat when it makes sense, when they're actually a competitor. This isn't really a competitive situation. This is annihilation, and I don't have a ton of respect for that record being set in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, it's like they're playing a middle school JV team or something. I don't know who this other school is, but same thought, man. It's like, dude, I'm sure you've got other kids on the team who probably
and if you don't,
who aren't playing in the competitive games, right? Like
that's right.
Yeah, we've all seen that. We've seen the guys on the end of the bench waving the towel. They won't let them play. You're up 79-0. Probably didn't need to get that far, honestly. You probably should have shut. The kid had 40 in the first quarter. Probably could have just shut him down after the end of the first quarter.
You wonder what in the world the other team looks like, dude. I mean, I feel like you could do middle school. I mean, I don't know. It's just bizarre. I mean, again, it's not a good situation for either team. But I think it makes it worse when when your goal was to set a record against a clearly way inferior team. So no respect on that. Somebody will have good stories to tell eventually.
Yeah. It's it like you said, it means a little more if it's a hey, if it was 125 to 120, wow, that's pretty cool. But
that's exactly right. I thought when I first said it, I was like, dude, if it was a close game, that's awesome, dude. What a great accomplishment. If it would have been within 25 points, what's still a great accomplishment. But
all right. So what do you think you could score right now against a bad middle school or bad high school basketball team?
No, I'm not.
You got to be in shape. You got to be able to go.
Yeah, this body's not great. My shot's not great. I mean, I was never played past much 6th grade, and so, I mean, I played against high school kids when I was in high school. But yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm a passer. I'm not anything. How about you, Paul? You actually played. I feel like you'd have more of a perspective on that.
I didn't. I mean, the most points I ever scored in a high school game was 18. I didn't take a lot of shots. My shot percentage was usually pretty high. I was a pretty close to the basket, getting rebounds, put back sort of thing. But I was never looking to put up shots. I mean, I did if I needed to. If I got the ball in the post, I would. But right now I couldn't get up and down the court enough.
Let me add something else. Let me add a little bit deeper. If you're recruiting, say this kid is kind of a player and he's marginal, somewhere small D1 school.
Well, he apparently averages like 32 points a game.
That's what I was going to say.
It helps to have 102 points to add to that average, but
Does that appeal to you and make you want to recruit him more, or not? The opposite.
So I don't put it on the kid. I put it on the coach.
Gotcha.
If I'm a kid, I'm out there competing. If I'm on the floor, I'm competing. I put that on the coach needs to say, "Hey, let's work on our half court set." I'm assuming what happens is the Waverly, the bad team, probably couldn't dribble the ball off the court, probably don't have a ball handler, and they were trapping. They were probably putting some pressure on, and just getting a ton of pretty easy layups. So I don't put it on the kid. I think he's probably a recruitable player. I would imagine if you're scoring 102.
So it doesn't have any impact. That's interesting.
No,
and you're probably right.
So. It's more on the coach. It's on the coach, right? Because as an athlete, you kind of have to do what your coach says, right? Do you get more kids involved as a teammate? Probably not. You're probably just steal it, go to the rack, and
and I wasn't a basketball player, so I don't know that mindset. I think I would have been playing basketball.
And we never played teams that bad. Like we had teams that weren't great in our conference, but not where we were beaten by. I mean, we beat them by like 25 or 30. Yeah, and we
weren't beating them by 100.
No, and they still had good athletes on the team. They still had people who could, move you around a little bit and things like that, right?
I mean, those quarters are so short. I mean, I've been to local high school games, and typically
it's 8-minute quarters, man. It flies by, yeah. And I think in the second, once you get up by a certain amount now, they have a running clock too, I think. So
you wonder if I don't know, if there wasn't, I don't know, it's terrible. So anyway,
so again, more on the coach. So, well, thank you guys for listening. Hey, we appreciate it. Hey, thanks to our listeners in Minnesota and Hawaii. Now we appreciate you guys hopping on. Would love to hear. We'd love to hear from more states. So I listed them off earlier. Make sure you're sharing this out, but make sure you subscribe, follow, like us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. We got some fun content on there. And of course, we're on Apple Pod, Spotify, iHeart, everywhere you find podcasts. So we appreciate y'all listening today.
Out. Go Pack.